This is the Corridor Management Committee for the Blue Line. I'm Charlie Zelli, Chair. It's great to see everybody. First off, I just want to make a couple of housekeeping items. This is an in-person meeting, but it is being live streamed and recorded. So you'll be able to see that video later. You can see it live now. Keep in mind that the microphones in front of you are live microphones. Always good. Safety tip to mention that. And if you have any interest in seeing the handouts from today, they will be posted on the website, which is bluelineext.org. Pretty easy. One word, bluelineext.org. And for those members of the public who are watching and want to submit comments for the CMC to consider, please feel free to submit them to Nakango Gula and anytime until Friday, the 21st, and they'll be posted on the website. And then for Nakango's email address, it's on slide 2, so you'll be able to find it. Also, we're going to have a couple of people using this room right afterwards, so we're going to try to really finish by 3 o'clock. And before we move on to the agenda, I want to take a moment to remind all stakeholders that the design decisions for Brooklyn Park and Crystal have been brought in front of the committee in the 2 most recent CMC meetings. And so today is Robbinsdale Day. I just said to the mayor, he said that that's why it's so sunny, because it's Robbinsdale Day. And now that leaves design decisions for Minneapolis to be brought in front of the committee at a future meeting. And so today's presentation is, we're going to share updates about the overall project as well, the environmental work, anti-displacement activities. But before we start, we're going to have 2 things. One is, let's introduce ourselves really quickly for everybody to know who we are at the table. And then also, we are starting a practice of allowing 3-minute public comments. 3 people have signed up, so we thought we'd do that right at the beginning of the meeting. Let's introduce ourselves first. Then we'll have an opportunity for members of the public to make brief 3-minute comments. And then we'll get into our agenda. So I am, as I heard recently, I always turn to my left because I'm a turning left kind of person. And go ahead, Irene.
Yes, Irene Fernando, Hennepin County Commissioner.
Jeff Lenny, Hennepin County Commissioner.
Jillian Rosenquist, Council Member from the City of Golden Valley.
Aaron Wagner, Robbinsdale City Council Member.
Mike Barnes, MnDOT's Metro District Engineer.
Bill Blonigan, Robbinsdale Mayor.
Jason Greenberg, co-chair of the Community Advisory Committee.
Ricardo Perez with Blue Line Coalition.
Dan Solar, Blue Line Project Office Staff and Hennepin County.
Chris Beckwith, Blue Line Project Director.
Jerry Yang, Blue Line Project Administrator.
Dan Dorr, Business Advisory Committee, pastor of Elam Church in Robbinsdale.
Dr. Tara Watson, Business Advisory Committee and business owner on West Broadway.
Suzanne Zabatka, here from Mayor Fry's office in the city of Minneapolis.
Nick Thompson with Metro Transit.
Marion Green, Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority.
Well, thanks. Welcome, everyone. And why don't I just call in the order of what people have signed up. Kathy Knightsky. Kathy, welcome.
Is there a mic? No?
It's right.
It's
right in front.
It's small, but it's there.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We just found out about 10 minutes ago that we would be speaking, or had the opportunity, so thank you, Council. I'm a resident of Lynn Park, lived there 27 years, right off of Lyndale and 14th. I ask you to go to your hearts and make sure that you are listening to the public. We've had several meetings. We've had input on what we would like in the community. It seems like it's not getting really taken to heart. So I ask you today, it's a beautiful day to be on the planet. We'd like to have that same thing in our neighborhood of Lynn Park. I ask you to have transparency. I ask you to lead with your heart and listen to the public. We are concerned about the safety in our neighborhood. It would go right in the backyards of people lining from 14th to Lyndale. The suburb in the city, when it was made 40 years, some years ago, wasn't really designed to have a light rail go right on by. So I ask you to consider the safety, the placement. We do want growth and development in North Minneapolis. I think if we all start opening our hearts, what's the best for our community? Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Now we'll hear from Tracy Penny. Is Tracy Penny here?
Yes, I'm sorry. Talking to one of my residential people here.
Telling her about the mic in front on the table.
Thank you for allowing us to speak today. And my big concerns about light rail is putting children and families between I-94 and a train. It seems like people of color are always getting put between something that does not seem to give them any type of life, gives them like a border, always a separation, some way, somehow. Residents that are there because that's where they want to be, but not with a train behind their home. Children have to always live behind a resident with a train behind their home. I think it just seems like it can be devastating to children that that's the life they have to have. I'm behind a train is behind my home. I have a wall, then there's a train. And I would like to see our community to be brought in things that give value to us, not take from us, not take from our wealth, not take from our property, not leave us feeling like everything we've done for our life and feel like this will be what we'll end our life with here, our home, our wealth. Now we're looking at something that says to us, you can't have that dream. That's supposed to be a dream. Homeowner is supposed to be your dream, that you become a homeowner and you love it and you love where you're at and you want to stay there, you want to raise your family there, you have loved ones that got raised there, loved ones that have died there. And I just want to see that the area stays Lyndale, the Lyndale that it is, and that they can enjoy it, love it, and not be worried about the crime, what follows the train. We have seniors, we have elementary schools, junior high schools, we have Ascension there, we have a park there, These are all things that we should be concerned about, the safety of our children. And I know there's a statistics about how many people will lose their life when that train comes in, and I just pray right now it's not going to be children. And that's all I have to say today, and I thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
And now we'll hear from Eva Young. Welcome.
Thank you for having this time for public comment. I just, it's like I wanted to address some things that have happened that have been reported in previous meetings that are not accurate. You, at the February meeting, that it was, someone was presenting about the outreach that Met Council was doing with the Lynn Park neighborhood and had a photo of one of our driveway chats. well, that photo, yes, we had a driveway chat, but that's very disingenuous because the photo didn't describe what happened at the driveway chat, which was pretty much everybody who spoke at that meeting was very strongly opposed to the Lindale alignment. And I felt, after seeing that, I felt like it was using our neighborhood and us, our event, as a prop for a different narrative. And I don't, I would like that not to happen again. The other thing I wanted to say is I do strongly support transit and I use transit. I don't use it all the time, but I do use I do use it to get to the airport and I use it to go to the university sometimes. And the idea that it's going to improve transit access for people in our neighborhood is not true. It's going to help people going through because you have less bus stops then, for the people who are actually in the neighborhood to use. And it's for people getting from the suburbs going to the Twins game or whatever. And so I just like to ask you to think about, be honest about who your audience is and if it really, really is serving who you're saying it's going to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Now we're going to the approval of the meeting summary from March 9th. Those summaries were sent out to you on April 6th for your review, and they're part of the packet. We also received letters from the City of Crystal and on the project design elements, and also from the West Broadway Business Area Coalition regarding some ongoing concerns. So I just wanted you to know that they have been attached to the meeting summary, so they're part of our permanent record. If there are any edits or corrections, questions, speak now. Otherwise, I'd be open to a motion and a second for approval of the.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any more discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved and will be posted on the website. All right, next on the agenda, we have a report from the Community and Business Advisory Committees. We have the CAC co-chair Jason Greenberg here, and then I think Dan Doerr is here. There you are. Okay, great. Jason, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Zelli. On our April 5th meeting, lots of great conversation and obviously covered a lot of what we're going to go over today. A few of the key points that came up, just questions from the CAC about how much of what we're talking about is locked in relative to like the overall project. So some things are set and other things are still being designed, and really just kind of came to the conclusion that there aren't very many things that are set in stone just yet, that they're, where there aren't as many changes further north than it's a little bit closer, but that there's a lot of work to do and that nothing's like particularly locked in. We talked about from an environmental standpoint, or the supplemental draft that's coming up, the timing of feedback from the community and just its content. So understanding, does the feedback in that period and the comment period have to be limited to the environmental supplemental draft, and just that essentially the response is that all community feedback is welcome in that time. And then getting into the Robbinsdale piece, just a lot of questions around like station planning, where the stations are going to be, alignment on 81, as well as the parking structures. So we had a lot of questions about where those are going to be located and the different configurations, what that would mean, and how far people would have to walk and things like that. There were questions around ridership, which come up in the community meeting comments, but just trying to get, if there is more updated information, if we have ridership statistics to like get that out, that's coming back from the community, that people are under the impression that there isn't much use of transit today, so that if the system is being used, if we have that data, to make sure that that's shared so we can get that to, like, just get the facts to the community. And then also just brought up there's been a discussion in Robbinsdale about elevated rail at 42nd and 81, so talked about that a little bit. And then one thing just relative to the CAC and our meetings, we made a decision based on feedback from one of our newer members that moving forward, we're going to include time at the end of our meetings to discuss what was previously covered. Because what we find is that as much as the project is and the team is getting us the information, we usually only have like a day to really dig into it and address our questions or really formulate ideas and questions. So a lot of that's happening on the fly in the meeting. So we're going to take a segment of each meeting to go back and see if there are follow-up questions, so that we just have space to give a little bit more depth to any of those concerns or questions or anything like that. So that'll be happening moving forward in our CAC meetings.
Great, thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Dan?
I would just say, much of the conversation that we had at the Business Advisory Committee on the 4th kind of echoed some of the sentiments at your committee meeting. Maybe I'll also add another topic that was raised was clarification on the construction process. If the construction process is 4 years in duration, folks asked about, would that be segmented? And that was clarified for us that it will be staggered and sequenced. Also, similar to some of the concerns that were raised in your committee meeting, a desire for the design work to be multimodal focused, the idea of taking into consideration all modes of movement, pedestrian, bicycle, bus lines, with regard to the design of the park and ride. I think that that covers it.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Tara Watson, I know that you may have had some comments.
Without repeating and overlapping, I think they did a pretty good job. Just kind of there's not really much more added value. No.
Well, thanks, all three of you, and I look forward to continuing to hear the reports about the nuances of what you're hearing and deliberating. Let's get into the project. Chris Beckwith will share the latest updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. It's a quick update from Dan and I, and then we'll hand it off to our team. But as you know, this is the Blue Line LRT extension, all the same bullet points we've been showing in prior meetings, so no changes there. But I did add a bullet at the end here, because sometimes we get the question, how much is this project going to cost, and what's the travel time, and what's the ridership? And if it wasn't obvious, I just wanted to let the group know that we have to make those decisions on like we said, the lines, lanes, and stations on this project before we can finish adding it up, what the cost would be, and calculating the ridership. So that will come, hopefully, as at the time that we get ready to publish our SDEIS, supplemental draft EIS. So that's something that we're still working on. The schedule, no changes on this slide either. We are working towards a community-supported route that best meets our project principles and goals, so those continue to drive decisions, continuing to get that community feedback, and in moving forward towards a policy decision this summer. One thing we wanted to highlight, though, today is we have heard through our outreach, what are you doing with this information? We feel like we're telling you these things. We aren't getting the return loop on what's being done with the comments that are coming forward. Well, we are collecting all of those, and we talk about that in the project team. But here's just a few examples in the last maybe 6 months or so of changes we've made or additional refinements we've looked at that were directly because of the outreach we did. So there's some in each of the communities. In Brooklyn Park, we had a meeting, did our outreach session up in Brooklyn Park, and here are just a few examples of the things that came out of that: additional station lighting, trail connections, a uniform fence, some of the things that were directly then inputted back into our design. In Crystal, as we talked about last month, we evaluated a 4, 5, and 6 traffic lane options with LRT from Bass Lake Road to 100. Robbinsdale we'll be talking a little bit more about today, but really looked at the park and ride options, the locations, the refined station options, and really took feedback from the public to inform those decisions, working very closely with the city. And then Minneapolis, there's a number of examples here as well. Of course, we added the option to reevaluate the east of 94 option, and that was added late last summer, and we're actively working on that. And then removing we kind of culled this down to only 2 options, if folks remember. We had a number of lines drawn, and now we're down to just the east of 94 and the Lindale option that we're looking at, and then the 21st option and the West Broadway option. So we're down to just a couple of options in a couple of different areas. One of the things we took off the table after our outreach and our feedback from the public was removing the mixed LRT and traffic, so putting both of those on 21st. There wasn't really any desire to do that, so we took that off the table. We are looking at reducing property impacts, so when we can pull in the impacts of our alignment and reduce those property impacts, that's just good design. So we've been doing that as we've been going along as well. And then adding a second station, we've heard feedback that there's a desire to do that, so we've been looking at those options. And then some discussion around the pedestrian connections to and from Lowry Avenue. Dan, do you have anything to add on?
These are all good, and this is all part of feedback certainly that we get. The one that's always going to be tricky is you see reduced property impacts where possible. You just know more and more and more and more as you continue to refine the design. So some of the things we haven't even dug into in detail, like, for example, is where are we going to put utilities and how do we move utilities around, and where will we have stormwater improvement parts of it. And so as we continue that's kind of an always evolving process, but we continue to meet with business owners, talk to property owners, look at different ways to advance the design. It's always part of what we're doing when we're moving forward.
All right. So I'll keep moving on our route recommendation schedule. There's a little bit of an adjustment here at our last meeting.
I have a question because I've gotten a few phone calls. There are letters and notifications that are going out to people, and they're getting asked if they can get site analysis. So they're getting letters asked if engineers can get permission to come on site to do testing.
Mm-hmm.
They are concerned that if they give permission, that they are agreeing to having this happen. They are not willing to give consent. So is there a way, how do you communicate this with people? Just because you are allowing people to potentially gain access, that does not mean you are in agreement to anything happening or taking place. But you are potentially willing to participate or not. How do you communicate that? Because, it may or may not be the right thing to agree to allow this to take place, but just communicating the right thing to people. Because right away people are, no, I'm not gonna let somebody come in. But, to get the right information, that may be the right thing to do. So how do you begin to have those conversations?
Mr. Chair and Dr. Watson.
Good question.
Yeah.
Chris, you have the way to get the language right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great feedback and not uncommon with this type of work when we're sending the letter out, asking permission to, whether it's taking soil borings or taking a few shovelfuls of dirt or just looking around the area for certain kinds of species. It's that kind of work. Some is not invasive. It's just walking across the property. Others can be a little bit more invasive, and the letters usually will say what type of work it is. One thing that comes to mind is we should make sure that our letter is written in a way that can convey the concern that you're talking about, that granting permission does not mean that you're giving consent, or I don't know exactly how we might want to word that, but that's one thing we could do is just make sure the wording of the letter is clearer on that. And then I think just when we communicate with people that we can just continue to reinforce that. I don't know if you have.
We just have, I know Nakongo would speak
Yeah.
to, because he's on there, we're getting many requests, and so our outreach team is meeting with many property owners and assuredly letting them know it's their option. You know, we're not saying you must or you have to. It's their option. I really liked how you put that, Dr. Watson, where people may be a little worried because they don't want to necessarily acquiesce to the fact that they're in favor of the project, but they do want to be able to make as much information available. That's really the goal here. I mean, obviously, we can do, say, a soil sample on public right-of-way next to a property. If we can do one, we can, we've identified that there could be contamination around. So we're just exploring. We're looking for things to help make decisions about the project. And so we're happy to visit with any property owner. They've visited with many already. They should contact, and we're happy to have an outreach person visit with them and, you know, explain it's not, we understand we're not saying we're buying any of your property, we're using any of your property, we're just doing that general exploration.
Commissioner Fernando.
Yes, and I think we should also, thank you for raising this, we should also just restate here that whatever these letters are and this activity is not community engagement, does not say that these individuals are in support of the project, and let's just restate that in this context, that the activity that is being described is for the purpose of the environmental aspect and is not, that it should not be presented in a way where it also indicates something outside of what is confined in that letter. So that's a really, really great thing to raise. And if for some reason that's not happening, then we've now said it here. So thanks for bringing it up. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Could I just add something real quick? Yeah, so we also picked up on those letters, and what Blue Line discussed or talked about was just a couple of things. One, we're concerned that if there are people impacted who might rent the property where they operate or live, they might not get these letters, as it might be sent directly to owners who might not be local people, maybe live out of state, or I don't know. So it's just one issue or one situation. And then, yeah, like I like your notion of thinking about the framing or the language on the letter. If we do that work, perhaps translating this information into the core languages that the county uses could be feasible. So we are communicating with people in their languages that they feel comfortable on. So I guess those are the two things that we wanted to add on this situation. So,
Suzanne.
Yes, thank you. I would echo a lot of what I've heard here. The other thing that I would note is we're beginning to hear, why did I get a letter but my neighbor did not? And it makes them a little concerned about the quality of the environmental study that's being taken on as well. So if there were some drafting of a letter that could explain a bit more how the environmental study is being conducted, that it will be reviewed by the Federal Transit Administration as a part of environmental review, I think that would also go a long way to engendering some trust and getting some reassurance about the thoroughness of the environmental study.
Sorry, and one other thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Watson.
And it's for, I believe, I'm hearing a year, so you're granting access up to a year, which kind of people can come and go for a year. I think you need, it would build a little bit more trust if you need to re-enter, that you communicate that, because that's transparency, not that somebody opens the door for a year for you. It's just come and go.
Mr. Chair, Dr. Watson, and again, maybe it doesn't state this that clearly. The right of entry is for a year, but no one can enter anyone's property on any given time during that year without also notifying and getting that permission from the property owner at the time they want to do that. So if one of our consultants needs to do something, they don't get to just go anytime during that year. They still have to work it out. It is private property. They have to work out the entry into that for that. The reason it's for a year is because this corridor is very, very, very long. So we're going to get, likelihood anybody's going to need to go there more than once is very small. But when that time frame is, could be any time over the next 12 months because we just haven't got the schedule yet or seen where that is. So it isn't like they get to just enter at any given time. But again, all these things are good comments about how can we be clearer about this, and make it more aware.
Good conversation. All right, Chris.
Thank you. So at our last Quarter Management Committee meeting, we talked about doing a specific session with this group on anti-displacement. And we were going to try to insert a second meeting maybe in April. And that's just really difficult to convene this group a second time. So instead, we're going to take our May Quarter Management Committee meeting and devote that to an anti-displacement work group update and a presentation to you all of the recommendations from that work group. So that's going to take place next month. It means we got to shift out our schedule. So we'll have Minneapolis in June instead of May, and then hopefully a recommendation from this group in July or in the summertime moving forward. So that's just a little update there. Nothing else has changed. And then you've seen this before too. This kind of just says the same thing. We'd have that anti-displacement in the middle of the slide here in May, and then it shows some of the Minneapolis outreach that is still underway, and the council update in Minneapolis is still a TBD, and then that we'd go June Minneapolis, and then the policy recommendation in July. That's all I had for a project update. Are there any questions for me or for Dan?
Any questions? I do think the schedule makes sense, particularly to have a whole meeting on the anti-displacement work. We're looking forward to getting into the substance of what those recommendations are. All right, no other questions? Then welcome. Kelsey Young is here to review our environmental process and updates. So welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. To just recap where we are in the overall environmental schedule, no changes to this slide from our last few months, but we're in the process of preparing the supplemental draft EIS now and looking to publish that towards the end of this year. And then future steps will include identifying and finalizing a preferred route and preparing a supplemental final environmental impact statement, which includes our mitigation commitments. We wanted to get in front of you on an upcoming Federal Register notice. This is a parallel step to our Minnesota notice that we published in the fall. This will be a notice of intent to prepare a supplemental EIS. So the EIS is underway now, but this provides another opportunity for public comment. It could be on whatever people wish to comment on, but the focus is intended to be related to the scope of the environmental impact statement, the alternatives under evaluation, and the topics to be studied. So same or similar parallel steps to our Minnesota notice, just on the federal side, and there will be a 30-day comment period. This is in the Federal Transit Administration's court to manage getting published, but we are expecting that notice will be published likely here in April, kicking off a comment period, but wanted to let folks know that is coming soon.
Question, Ricardo.
Thank you. So we will be notified via the official project channels about the commenting period and that kind of stuff, or how will we know when that happens?
Mr. Chair, committee members, we will do some communications out about that and let our committees and email lists know, and have information on our website as well. Any other questions about this?
Great. You're done?
Nope.
No, keep going. Keep going.
Switching topics here. Our environmental highlight topic for this month is related to environmental justice, and wanted to walk you all through and get you familiar with how we evaluate environmental justice impacts as part of Blue Line Extension. And it's a multi-step process. So we begin with identifying the presence and locations of environmental justice populations or communities. We know that we have environmental justice communities in this corridor, certainly. So we start with identifying populations of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as low-income populations. And we need to use both census data as well as information that we're gaining through our outreach activities, knowing that there's much to the story beyond what the strict data is able to tell us. As we're hearing in our meetings about key locations where people live or work, businesses, et cetera, that's informing this identification process. The next step is that we consider potential effects to environmental justice populations, both negative impacts as well as benefits. And we take that through the lens of trying to look at the question of, are there disproportionately high and adverse impacts? So what that means is that we're looking at the impacts in the context of the other populations along the corridor that are not environmental justice populations, and are those negative impacts disproportionately high and adverse? This topic area is a summary of all the other impacts that we'll have along the project for our other subject area topics that we've talked about in our previous meeting. So taking that lens of looking at everything and kind of collating and summarizing that information as it relates to impacts on environmental justice populations. And this is another piece where we also incorporate information from our outreach activities about what we are hearing of what's particularly of concern in identifying those adverse impacts and benefits. And then lastly, we take that identification of adverse impacts and we look at methods to avoid, minimize, or mitigate those impacts. And for the supplemental draft EIS step, this will be a preliminary analysis of those impacts and potential mitigation. And when the SDIS is published, that will be something that we would look to get comments on and use that information to finalize our mitigation commitments in the supplemental final EIS. Now I'm done with that.
Any
information.
questions for Kelsey? Environmental justice, Ricardo.
Thank you. So just curious, I think we might have touched on it the last time, or I can't recall when, but it would be great to hear again. So given the fact that in Minneapolis, it's the area with the biggest changes, right? As you're looking at the Brooklyns and the rest of the corridor, is environmental justice chapter being like updated? How much is that changing, or how similar is it staying to what it was done in the previous version of the project, I guess?
Mr. Chair, committee members, that's a great question. Since the previous environmental review for Blue Line Extension was completed, prior to this most recent census, we are looking at both from a data standpoint and just analyzing the impacts, looking at the entire project corridor. So certainly in Minneapolis, we have multiple route options and station options that are under evaluation, and we would expect that environmental justice would help inform that recommendation path. But the analysis does cover the entire corridor, and same lens of identifying populations, understanding if there are disproportionately high and adverse impacts, and then looking at ways to avoid, minimize, and mitigate those impacts for the whole corridor.
Great. Oh, Irene. go ahead.
Yes, I just think that's a really, really good question, because there are aspects of the project that are building upon previous, and there are aspects that really shouldn't. I mean, the previous document, the very large document, was many, many years ago now, and especially as it relates to climate, the patterns, of course, we don't have to talk about it here as we've had this very long winter and then 80-degree days. And so just wherever possible, particularly on the environmental side, to be looking at the whole corridor and seeing that from today's perspective versus over-anchoring to what was present in the past. So I appreciate the question and the response. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions, comments for Kelsey? Thank you. I do appreciate this conversation about environmental justice impact, really important. regarding the Federal Register, it was my first job out of college. I read the daily Federal Register. I don't recommend that to anybody. It's important that we know when it's published, so there you go.
Your first job from a
Out of
decade
college.
ago? Just kidding.
First-
Really?
I could tell you more about that.
Sounds riveting.
It was riveting, riveting. I know a lot.
Yeah, offline. I
We'll
won't
take
subject
that offline.
everybody.
Strike that for the minute. All right, Nick Nakongo, you're going to talk about Robbinsdale. This is why we're here.
Yes, Mr. Chair, committee members, yes, this is Robbinsdale month here and happy to bring this forward. So the first slide up here really is a grounding slide. We've shown this. We'll continue to show this throughout the project. I mean, this is our design principles. This is what we use to make sure that we're evaluating the options, the design that we're working on, and we're meeting these principles along the corridor. And helps just keep us in track, and then also helps us to communicate, the reasons, here's why we are going this direction and what we're doing. So, next slide. So, again, with each of our project partner cities along the corridor, we are working with this design decisions document that should be, I believe, in the packet, but this is a document that's going to be living with us through the whole process, through our design process. And this is outlining our decision-making and processes and the engagement plan and all the input that we get into it and how we come to our decisions and how we inform the environmental work that Kelsey and her team are working on. So this is very important. And then this will continue us through that environmental phase into our design phase, and we'll keep tracking our outstanding issues and questions that we have for design. And we carry what's called an issues tracker with each city that will monitor, okay, what are the topics that we need to discuss, whose court is it in, when do we think we're going to have these resolved by, if it's something in the next month or something that we take care of in 60% plans, we'll keep this forward. So as we move into Robbinsdale, though, some of the things that we knew as we came from the route recommendation last spring was our route alignment, center running along County Road 81 through, from Brooklyn Park through Crystal down into Robbinsdale. And assumption was that, where we can and where it's feasible to be at grade center running in County Road 81. So one of the things in Robbinsdale what we needed to do was to evaluate downtown configuration for traffic and operations and right of way and how a station would fit within the downtown area and if there's a park and ride there. So those are the things that we knew about. Construction, we know going into this that we have to cross over Trunk Highway 100, and by doing that, there's existing bridges there that we know we'll have to reconstruct at least a portion of that bridge over 100 to give the width that we'll need to bring guideway through there for a track and the capacity, the structural capacity that we'll need for the train and operations to run across that. We also knew that there was a desire for a downtown station in Robbinsdale, and where does that station go, as well as it had been identified in our previous alignment, and the assumption was that there would be a downtown park or ride in Robbinsdale. Where is that park and ride going to be, and how large is it, and does it have a transit capacity to it, a transit function to it with that station? And then also, we knew that there was a station at Lowry Avenue up right at North Memorial Hospital. So those are what we knew coming into it. So the next couple slides that I have up here are just to give a framework of what it looks like running through Robbinsdale and give an idea of just kind of the scope of that. So Robbinsdale starts at 47th up on the north end, just north of Highway 100. As we follow the alignment, I guess from left to right here on this slide, we cross over Highway 100, and that gold over 100 just shows the bridge reconstruction or structure reconstruction. Center running through there, and then as we get into the downtown area, there's a dashed rectangle around that downtown area, and that's really where we're evaluating or have evaluated where a station and a park and ride would go within that area. And then that last slide went to about 40th. This is just picking up the southern portion of Robbinsdale, going from basically 40th south through Robbinsdale, again, center running through this area. And then as we get farther to the south, closer to Lowry Avenue, we come up on a structure with the light rail and then have an elevated or structured park or station at that location at Lowry Avenue. And then we come back and continue to connect back into West Broadway as we move into Minneapolis. So I guess out of these, the key designs decisions that we needed to bring forward to help us focus in on what this route looks like, to get our lines, lanes, and stations here in Robbinsdale was that route alignment, the configuration of the guideway, what that looks like in Robbinsdale. The downtown station, again, that location, where does that station go within the downtown area that best serves the needs of Robbinsdale? The park and ride, where is that location? How is it in reference to where a station would go? How does it fit in with that downtown? Do we have transit connections to that station? Right now there is a transit function or a transit center at Hubbard Avenue. We're considering or evaluating moving that transit function down to a park and ride in Robbinsdale area. And then again, the key decisions as we get down into Lowry Avenue of how that station fits in there and how it looks within the city. So next slide, please. These are just a few of a lot of options that we've evaluated in the last year and a half, 2 years, working closely with city staff and with the city leadership down there. And this is just to kind of evaluate, some of the things that we looked at. As you look at the upper left-hand corner, that view, that graphic there shows a station just south of 41st Avenue, and then a potential park and ride location that's more in that tan greenish color in that upper left-hand side of that intersection, as you see it. As we move down to the lower left-hand side, again, this is an evaluation that was done with the station just north of 40th and with a park and ride in the location next to that. And then over on the right-hand side shows a station location just to the south side of 40th and showing, the potential for a park and ride structure where Elam Church's existing parking lot is. So these are, again, just we've evaluated quite a few different alignments, station locations, where park and rides can be, and really working with the city staff with an independent review consultant that was assisting the city staff on recommendations and evaluations of the work we're doing, and station area planning, helping to help us focus in on a decision and help the city with some guidance too. So the next slide here is what what we hear from the city of Robbinsdale, from their leadership, from their staff, the preferred downtown station and park and ride location to evaluate further in this. So what we're showing here is a station south of 40th Avenue. So that's the station on the right-hand side there in the gold framing. So we're at grade with that station location. And then to evaluate a park and ride in that northwest corner of County Road 81 and 40th Avenue. So that's shown in the lower left-hand side of it. Again, some of the things that we need to work with as we start getting farther into design of the station locations is always safety. How do we get folks through across the roadway to the station safely, from the station safely? What does it look like? How does that station architecture work within the city? The park and ride is another one where we need to evaluate what is the right size for that park and ride that we can accommodate the ridership that we would project for a station, but what also fits within the city for their use and needs. And then again, as we talk about how do we get that transit function, those bus transit connections incorporated into that facility so we have really good, robust connections from light rail to our other transit modes. And then other things that we look at with the park and ride is a mobility hub too. How do we get in the different modes of mobility? Bike lockers and is there option for charging stations or maybe like our cars and things like that. Moving a little bit farther south is the Robbinsdale or the Lowry station in Robbinsdale. So this plan view kind of shows the surroundings around it of those neighborhoods with North Memorial in that lower left-hand side, the campus that's shown there in Oakdale Avenue. And then Lowry Avenue as we get over towards Minneapolis and boundaries and serving Robbinsdale neighborhoods and communities also. So again, that's in the yellow oval there is where the station location is. And I have a much better graphic here to kind of give a perspective of how that could fit within that area, within the location there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a perspective as if you were in between the North Memorial complex there. The left-hand side shows the existing park and ride structure where there's a helo pad on the top of it for the helicopters that come in. And then on the right-hand side is where the hospital portion is of the campus. And we're kind of up over where the emergency room is with this view. So we're looking east towards Lowry Avenue. You can see West Broadway. The bridge structures are right behind the guideway, the aerial guideway for the light rail and the station there that's showing. So this shows it in perspective on either end of that station. So the train is in the station. You can see there's some roofs over the station for shelter on it. And then on either end of it, that station would be vertical circulation towers with stairs and elevator to get up to that station. And so there would be good access from either end. So this again is something that we'll need to work with the hospital, around their property, with the city of Robbinsdale, of how it works in there, with the city of Minneapolis, since it closely connects to their population, and also with the Minneapolis Park Board, because we'll have direct connections here to the Theodore Wirth Parkway and the Grand Rounds in this area. So we'll really want to focus on access, pedestrian access through this area, how it works and fits through there. So.
Oh, go ahead, Mayor.
So, Mr. Chair, and if you could go back to that last slide, North Memorial has approached us and said there could be a problem with the helipad and the wash, as it relates to the station. Mm-hmm. I don't know a lot about that other than they're now concerned and saying, oh, why don't you just build us a new helipad? So I know you're not prepared to make that determination here today, but what are the big general issues that I need to think about in looking at this?
Chair, Mr. Mayor, that is a concern that North Memorial has brought up to us about how the operations. So we're evaluating, twofold, how a light rail would impact helicopter operations, whether it's radio frequency, electrical, whatever that is, and then how a helicopter could potentially affect, our operations and things on the station. So we're looking at that, the proximity. We'll do an evaluation, are we really close to that? So a prop wash is an issue for that. Yeah, and how do we fix that? So we're evaluating we're finding other conditions similar to this, at least nationally, if not in other places, to use that as a basis. But that is a key on us that we've understood and we'll keep working forward on.
Thank you for doing that.
Just quick question. I know it isn't, but is related, but why pay for parking when now you can get it for free? Wouldn't that affect their, parking is a part of their revenue generating things at the hospital, because parking isn't free and it's not cheap either. So now there's this huge complex for free parking. So now,
Good question.
so now you've got a couple hundred spaces or 100 spaces, and so now you can park for free. So just wondering if that was even a thought or a question.
Mr. Chair, Dr. Watson, a couple things here. We are not directly connected to the park and ride at North Memorial, so they have pay parking for that complex. So it's not intended to be connected to the station as a park and ride. The park and ride that's in the downtown area is a little over a mile away.
Okay.
So
When you,
quite a
I
distance.
guess I'm a little thrown off by the picture, because it seemed, when you started tying in the heliport and all that, I just got a little thrown off. Okay.
Yeah, we made the jump from downtown.
Different
There we
station.
go.
A
All
mile
right,
south. So
different
I
conversation.
apologize for that
I
confusion.
apologize.
Well, Nick, you used the term park and ride when you were describing the parking ramp at North Memorial. That
Oh, sorry. That could.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize for that. So again, our commitment from the project is to continue our coordination with the city of Robbinsdale, continue the partnership that we've had with them, working with staff and leadership to refine the station locations and design to make sure that we're optimizing our rail operations in the downtown area with existing traffic and paying attention to, what our right-of-way impacts are there. So, I know the city has brought forward a letter, I believe in the packets here, that will be recorded for the next meeting. But, one of the things they've asked us to look at, do we need to go on a structure through that downtown area to address safety, traffic operations, or right-of-way. So we'll continue to work with the city on that. The downtown park and ride, again, as I mentioned, location of it, how do we get it to fit within the site? What's that location? What is the appropriate size for the city of Robbinsdale? And then, how do we incorporate a transit function in there that's efficient and works well? And, with every one of our cities out here, the concern is how do we address safety and security? And that's twofold. That's, the existing system, how do we pay attention to safety out there? And what are those initiatives that Metro Transit has taken to make sure our system is safe and inviting for folks to use? And then also just we pay a lot of attention in our design. I mean, it's paramount in our design is safety. That it's engineering fundamentals 101. That we're making sure that we're designing a safe system and we're taking into account those things, and particularly bike and pedestrian safety to get to our stations in those locations. So that's our Robbinsdale presentation. Well, other than some feedback that we've heard, but if there's any.
Any questions at this point? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tara. While I don't live in Robbinsdale, I live in Northeast Golden Valley, and so I use downtown Robbinsdale a lot. And one of the things that I use in downtown Robbinsdale is the great service center that they have at their city hall. And so I guess when we think about transit and we think about making sure that people can get to important destinations for their daily lives, I think of something like a service center where you can renew your license and get a passport and things like that as a really important destination. So I guess I'm a little concerned with the southernmost choice on this map being the furthest from that service center, which we know is a little bit kind of off this map to the north. So maybe Robbinsdale folks or the Blue Line team could talk about how that was taken into consideration, and thank you.
So, yeah, I can talk about that. If you would go to slide number 22. I personally thought that, so what we're ending up with is a council consensus that It should be at 40th Avenue rather than at 41st. And not only should it be at 40th Avenue, it should be south of 40th Avenue. And my bias and thought going into this was to have it at 41st for just the same reasons that you're talking about. I became convinced that it should be, now if you'll go to slide number 23, I became convinced that it should be that alignment for a couple of reasons. Even though it is farther from the downtown, right where it is there is closer to the present population centers of apartments and things, although the future may not look that way. In fact, there's a good argument that the new development will come more close to the 41st that you're talking about. That parking ramp there, proposed possible parking ramp, is the US Bank parking lot. That's just a one-owner situation, more easy to negotiate with them and get something done. Other concerns that Robbinsdale has that's not directly answering your question is that there's a proposal that there'd be like 550 or maybe a 500 car parking ramp there, and the council is more going towards 200 to 300, saving you some money, which we have an idea of how to spend it later. And so,
Police always do.
Okay, so we hired an independent review consultant. That independent review consultant, Nick talks about structure, I talk about elevated. That independent consultant said that if we have this station right south of 40th Avenue, right there, that can be at grade, center running. And we had our consultant figure out, hey, could we have side running? And the consultant agrees with the team here, it should be in the center. So we looked at that too. We can have that at grade. And then our proposal is, we're not at the point of do we need, we're at the point we do want. We think it should be a structure and go over, starting at 40th Avenue there, on the north side of 40th Avenue. Then it'll go, I wish I had the slide numbers to show you, but then it'll go over 41st, over 42nd, which is the same as County Road 9 and Lake Drive. It's got 3 names. And so that will keep us from having so much impact in our city of the train bumping the traffic. And in fact, theoretically, you could improve the pedestrian linkages, even though you'd have things up in the air and now you're starting to look like Chicago. We could even improve the pedestrian linkages. We shouldn't have as much bad effect of the traffic linkages, the public safety, the fire department, the police department, waiting for a train. That will cost you money. You spent money elsewhere. You built a $93 million wall for BNSF, and Nick can give you the statistics. And that, I know that wasn't your fault. I know that BNSF is a bad partner in some ways. But this is the biggest thing that we think we need. We've got our letter, and our letter tells about other things. But the main thing is that this can go up and over. I guess the team will have to consider whether you want it to go up and over at Highway 100 also. That's a possibility. Rather, I won't get into that. So those are our main things. And then with regard to the park and ride, that park and ride is projected to have the most park and riders of any place on this line. So we want to do our part to help the whole community and to help the whole Twin Cities area. We don't want to be the park and ride center of the world, though, or the center of the area. We want to make it so it's fair. And we don't want to waste your money in building a park and ride facility that's too big. So another thing, there's going to have to be bus connections there. We've got a transit center right now in Robbinsdale where it should have been and where it never will be. So we want to make sure that while the park and ride is while the bus center at the ramp park and ride is fair and it facilitates connections, that it doesn't become a layover, run the bus, pollute our local area type of a situation. So that, again, that has to be a fair amount, but I can't say how much that is, of parking there for the buses. And Nick has talked about all the other things that we want to have, but that's too much detail.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess just since we're on it, I just wanted to just bring up, so the letter, can we get that added to the materials for this meeting? I know Crystal had their letter in the previous meeting notes, so if we could just get that, that would be awesome.
Yes.
And then, so thank you. But yeah, so talking about like the station location, there was a community member earlier that spoke about like who is this serving, and so the reason that we wanted it more south, that Bill already, or Mayor Blonigan already alluded to, is because it's closer to the residents of Robinson. I think we feel that that's who it should be, you know, prioritizing. So that was kind of the impetus for that. But yeah, again, there's out of the other concerns community members have, it's like besides like the public safety and the cost, the other big one is the traffic on with County Road 9 and how to solve that either during construction or afterwards if the line is at grade. And so I think we're just trying to, you know, really speak to those concerns. And that's something I think we have the ability to elevate it over County Road 9. So, thank you.
All right, thanks. Commissioner Lundy.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the Robbinsdale leadership and staff and community for engaging the process. I remember a couple years ago, Mayor Blonigan, we started at your driveway, and we asked people to think about, share their thoughts, and they did. They weren't shy. And then also share if it comes, because we always talked about, you know, if you're not asking for stuff. And so I'll take the blame for encouraging them to ask for everything. But not North Memorial. That one's not, they're on their own. Anyway. But just wanted to thank Robbinsdale publicly, because I know we've got a distance. We have a long ways to go. And there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of work to be done. But coming up with some of the, how it might fit is important, how it fits inside Robbinsdale's vision for their future, not just the vision for the whole Blue Line, but also within your city's vision. And I did want to highlight that we have had conversations with county staff about County Road 9, because we did stop that rework because we thought, why would we want to do work if we're going to run potentially on VNSF? So I always know that at some point, whether it's part of the project, outside of the project, County Road 9 needs to get finished because we held it off. And I think part of that process will obviously involve the city for how we can make it safer and how we can make sure that people feel like it's not a speedway and then all of a sudden a left turn. I know the Celeste, her buildings have been hit a couple times by people not making the corner. So I just want to acknowledge that part, and whether it's part of the project or not, it is something that needs to be done for the city of Robbinsdale. And so I know we have a lot of work, and I just want to thank elected leadership and staff and community for diving in and kind of working through some of this with many steps left to be done. So thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Fernando.
Yes, thank you. And I know that we're in an input gathering, and so I think it's great that Robbinsdale has offered their input. I do want to highlight what Councilmember Rosenquist is highlighting, which is how, you know, whenever it comes to the broader kind of review, just a perspective on how service centers are intersecting with the decision, other bus lines, you know, BRTs that are being considered. I know that was something that was discussed around, you know, Lowry, and then of course the trails, particularly for Golden Valley, who was a part of the alignment of yesterdecade, it seems now.
Yeah.
So I know that that's not at this stage, but just want to echo kind of what Councilmember Rosenquist was getting at a little bit. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments?
Just super quickly, more on the documents that we're getting here, which are great, but it will be great, especially as the anti-displacement work gets published or we keep moving forward with it, to see a portion that talks about the recommendations of anti-displacement as it pertains to each of the cities receiving the train. I know that you're talking about turning left or right, and this is about policy and investment, but I think nonetheless it will be a good way of like merging those two ongoing bodies of work or whatever. So, yeah, just that comment there.
Sure, it'll come together. Any other thoughts, questions? Well, thank you, Robbinsdale, for your candid input. And Nakango, we're going to talk about community feedback. Speaking of feedback.
Thank you. Well, in terms of community feedback received from Robbinsdale, we held our most recent open house on March 6th. What we heard is that downtown Robbinsdale has, over the years, developed to become a vibrant downtown. That LRT should fit into that and bring foot traffic to downtown. And again, as that gets done, that we address issues related to safety and security, that traffic congestion gets addressed, that we make the community good looking, as some of the stakeholders had said, add some green space, connecting stations and pedestrians and bike facilities, additional lighting. We've also heard mixed support for the project. We heard that some community members have been waiting for a long time for the project to be built. And we've also heard from other community members that now that the alignment goes in the middle of the roadway, that we need to consider other factors in terms of noise in proximity to residential properties and things of that nature to make this a successful project. This is pretty much similar to what we've heard in the past from Robbinsdale communities. Same theme in terms of safety and security, in terms of station connections and pedestrian connections, and also impacts to properties and business and homes along the alignment, visual impacts and things related to that, and also traffic. That's the bulk of what we've heard, and we continue to engage communities along Robbinsdale. And now that it's getting warm outside, we will even be doing more and attending more events held by Robbinsdale communities. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Nakango?
I'll just have a comment. Thank you, Chair. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to staff, or project staff, for doing the community events, and then also being at the various work sessions, council meetings to, answer our questions. So I just wanted to say thanks for that.
Great.
Back to Nick.
So Chair, a preview here for Minneapolis in June, hopefully. So what we'll be discussing there and what we're working on is the route option from Target Field Station to West Broadway. How are we going to get there? And then the route option for LRT on West Broadway or 21st with that work and what we have. And then the number of stations along that portion of the alignment. Is it one station through that area, or are we able to provide two stations for the area along West Broadway? And then we have a station at Penn Avenue. How is that located? How is that going to fit within the area? So
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
In June. All righty. Kathy Gold from Hennepin County here to give us an update on the anti-displacement work group and the process and the schedule. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Chair, committee members. Kathy Gold with Hennepin County on the Blue Line Extension team. Just going to start out with the timeline, and I've brought this before you last session, but we did finish our 2 final work group sessions in February. Kira's been busy compiling the report. We expect that toward the end of April now. That timeline shifted just a bit. And then in May, of course, as Chris teed up, we will be here in front of you to review all the outcomes and recommendations for the anti-displacement work. And then in May, following through with phase 2 and implementation. So just teeing up that meeting in May, wanted to provide you with a little bit of context as to what we will be talking about. And thought we would start out a little bit with giving a base or a place to start is the corridor history, how past policies have harmed our Black and brown residents, and just kind of looking at that and how this work is trying to move toward an equity building, wealth building place for our residents alongside of this project. And so, of course, we'll review what the process and the research behind the work was and how that discussion and progress kept evolving our work as we worked through those work sessions. And then the final recommendations and outcomes, really looking at what the report is talking to, and the accountability mechanisms that will be brought from the work. How do we measure how these recommendations are moving as we progress through this project? Are they working? Do we need to tweak? Do we need to add? And then we will have anti-displacement work group members at the table next session in May to also have dialogue with this group. And I think that's really important that we hear from those members as well to guide this work. This is really important work. It's hard work, and it's going to take public and private together to work together to lift up this work and everything in between. No one entity is going to be able to manage the volume of work this is, administer it, the outreach, the events that need to happen to get our community members readied up for these events. So those are the kinds of things that we'll talk about in May. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions, comments at this point? Well, thank you, Kathy. You heard it, May 11th. Be here.
Awesome.
We're gonna have the full report, and maybe we'll have the report in advance, so we'll have a chance to look at it. All right, good. And with that, it's a beautiful day, still a beautiful day. And appreciate all this conversation, good ideas and sharing. I look forward to the next meeting. This meeting's adjourned. As my mother used to say, I invite you to take your conversations outside of the room, because this room is going to be used. But you're welcome to hang out in the lobby. Good to see you all.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay.